The coffee hadn't even cooled before the knife went in. I was 3 sips deep into my usual Tuesday, the kind of morning where muscle memory runs the first 2 hours of your life, when I got the calendar ping. Quick sync, VP product, 8:45 a.m., conference room B. No agenda, no title, just the new guy's name and that passive-aggressive sprinkle of corporate optimism. Quick sync usually meant someone else screwed up. But this time, I was the one headed for the meat grinder. I walked in. He was already seated. New VP of product. Name's Chad because of course it is. Wearing an oat milk-colored sweater that probably cost more than my car's transmission rebuild. Hair slicked like he combs it with investor tears. Behind him, a slide deck open on the TV, full of pastel bubbles and phrases like agile cohesion and code economy. He looked up, smiled like we were about to talk golf, then motioned to the chair across from him like he was inviting me to my own funeral. Hey, just wanted to loop you in real quick, he said, already clicking through slides like a preschool teacher who forgot what page he's on. We're doing some quarterly streamlining, flattening silos, maximizing leverage points. I stared. Said nothing. The air smelled like printer toner and betrayal. He kept going. You've been instrumental, of course. Legacy knowledge like yours? So valuable. But we're shifting to a more automated architecture. Scalable. Lightweight. Future-facing. Translation. We're firing you, but not before condescending to your face. He clicked to a new slide. My name. Under a red header. Role redundancy. I waited. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me thought there'd be a negotiation. A handoff. A grace period. But no. Just a perfectly rehearsed line. Today will be your last day. The clock on the wall said 9:01. Security will deactivate your access at 9:03, he added, like that was supposed to soften the blow. The room went cold. No farewell lunch. No ops documentation walkthrough. No handover plan. 5 years of maintaining, patching, rescuing this spaghetti tower of code we called a logistics platform. And they were kicking me out like a leftover in the break room fridge. Still, I kept it together. Just nodded slowly. Let the silence breathe. Then I asked one question. Who's taking over the live logic failovers? He blinked. It's all documented, right? My lips did something between a smirk and a twitch. Sure, I said. It's all documented. He exhaled, relieved. The kind of relief you see in someone who doesn't know how close they are to swallowing a grenade. See, here's the thing about documentation. You can write down what something does, but not why it was written that way. You can trace a function's output, but not the 17 fire drills that taught you when to override it manually, or why that one external API chokes on leap years unless you feed it a dummy payload first. I stood up, reached into my bag, pulled out the company laptop, placed it gently on the table like a surgeon laying down a scalpel after a 12-hour procedure. The kind of move that says, I've done all I can. Good luck. Then I looked at him, really looked, and said, you should keep a pot of coffee on. You're gonna need it. I left the room at 9:02. By 9:03, my access was gone. By 9:04, their system was a ticking time bomb, and none of them even knew it. The system booted me before I finished my last sip. 1 second I was checking logs out of habit, watching the CPU load on the order routing cluster hover just a notch higher than usual. And the next, boom. Slack logged out. Email window blinked shut. My terminal flashed a red authentication error like a death certificate. No warnings. No countdown. Just exile. 9:03 a.m. on the dot. Precision that would have made me proud if it hadn't been used to gut me. I stared at the blank screens for a beat longer than I should have. My desk was still warm. The space heater at my feet hummed like it didn't get the memo. There was a sticky note under my keyboard with 3 letters. WDH. A private reminder scrawled years ago during a crisis nobody remembers but me. What does handoff? An inside joke with myself. A question nobody ever asked. I powered everything down, unplugged the charger, and packed slow. Not performative, just deliberate. Every cable rolled. Mousepad folded. The tiny Totoro plush my kid gave me, back into the bag. That thing had sat through more outages than half the engineering team. No tears. No jailing. I didn't even glance at the HR rep fake typing emails 2 desks away. Just kept scanning the room. Over by the dev pit, someone said, "He's really going, huh?" No response. Just the rustle of keyboards picking up speed. A little nervous. A little guilty. But not enough to stop what came next. By the time I zipped my backpack, they were already running the patch. Hotfix deployment for the Q3 order delay issue. I'd written the draft patch weeks ago, but never deployed it. Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. It rerouted traffic through a backup pipeline I'd never documented. On purpose. That path required a manual greenlight because the API it depended on had a nasty memory leak if left open more than 72 hours. But none of them knew that. And why would they? Chad had made it very clear. If it's not in the confluence, it doesn't exist. So now they were pushing the fix, fingers flying. I watched them through the glass as I walked past, bag slung over one shoulder. The new dev lead, Cody or Corey or some other man-child C-name, said loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's just data plumbing. Anyone can manage this." Right. And anyone can drive a tank. Until they don't see the cliff. I paused at the door to the server room. My little bunker. The place where I used to spend lunch breaks tweaking CPU affinity flags or coaxing old queries to run 3% faster, just for the hell of it. There was still a bag of Peanut M and MS in the drawer, hidden behind a stack of Cat6 cables and spare fuses. I didn't take them. Let them rot. Instead, I gave one last look at the main ops screen. Live dashboard pulsing with a smug green glow. Everything looked fine. Seemed fine. That's the thing with Ghost logic. It doesn't scream when you remove it. It just waits. I hit the elevator button and exhaled. The kind of breath you only take when you've carried a system on your back for 5 years and finally let go. Somewhere above, a Jenkins job had just kicked off. And somewhere deep in that job, a logic branch was about to trigger a fallback routine that used to work, until someone deleted the crontab alias tied to it. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't touch a thing. But I built that system like a jungle, alive, evolving, laced with invisible vines holding the whole thing upright. And now they were charging through it with machetes, blind and smiling. By the time I stepped outside, the sky was unusually clear for a Tuesday. I pulled my coat tight, turned my phone to airplane mode, and walked away from the building like I'd never once bled for its uptime. Behind me, a fragile empire was about to meet the one thing it couldn't A/B test. Me gone WY917. The dashboard bled red. It started as a flicker. A tiny alert buried in the corner of the ops display. Delayed processing node. ORD7. Harmless on its own. Those nodes hiccup sometimes. Normal stuff. If someone resets the handoff job manually by 9:15. But the one who always did that. He was halfway across town, sipping air and deleting Slack from his phone. Back at HQ, the flicker turned into a flare. ORD7 fed into the real-time order aggregation engine, which meant fulfillment status updates for over 30,000 active packages across the Midwest were now stuck in limbo. Clients expecting 5-minute refreshes were suddenly staring at 15. Then 30. Then static. A product manager noticed. Raised a ticket. But no one touched it, because everyone was watching the main dashboard slide into chaos like a tipped plate of spaghetti. 9:18. API timeout starts stacking. The warehouse monitoring interface goes down, just as a Fortune 100 logistics partner was giving a live pitch to investors, demoing our revolutionary real-time tracking platform. Right as he clicks refresh, the screen goes blank. Just a red spinner and the word, retrying. He thinks it's a Wi-Fi issue. The room goes quiet. Then it doesn't come back. Back at our HQ, phones light up. 9:20. The CFO's assistant storms into the finance wing. "Where's the Q4 compliance binder? We're supposed to file with Daughtry and Bloom today." The binder wasn't physical. It lived in a series of interconnected exports, one from ops, one from billing, and a third from the anomaly log. That last one, I ran it manually, cross-checked discrepancies with raw table reads. Nobody else knew which fields mattered, because I'd been the one who designed the custom logic around early flag refund thresholds. You couldn't automate that. Not without throwing the whole model off. They'd never asked how I caught those invisible refund leaks early. Now they were learning. A DevOps guy, Dylan or Dustin or some other intern with a GitHub bio longer than his resume, ran into the main room breathless. The fallback queues looping. Something stuck in pre-validation. That something was their understanding of how the system actually worked. 923. 2 Tier 1 clients open urgent escalation tickets. One threatens SLA penalties. Another goes dark. That one's handled by Marcy in Client Ops. She's 6 months pregnant, and trying not to cry as she forwards error logs she doesn't understand to a team that doesn't know where to start. Meanwhile, a floor up and a world away, the CTO is still in his parking spot, balancing an Americano and an iPad, unaware that the backbone of his platform is rotting in real time. And me? I'm at Lou's Diner on 3rd, same as every other Tuesday, ordering the same damn thing I always do when something's breaking, but I'm not the one expected to fix it. 2 eggs over medium, bacon crisp, sourdough toast, black coffee. The waitress, Janie in her 60s, calls everyone darlin', pours me a refill and says, "Rough morning." I shake my head. "Nope," I say, folding my phone into the napkin dispenser. "Best I've had in years." Outside, traffic hums past. People live their lives. The sun still climbs. But in that glass office tower I left behind, the air's already heavy with that specific corporate stink, burnt pride, evaporating confidence, and the slow realization that the guy you thought was just the data plumber, he was the goddamn water main. And now the whole system's spraying mud. The CTO walked in at 9:38, holding a protein shake and exactly zero patience. He wasn't the kind of guy who panicked easily, retired Marine turned enterprise tech whisperer, hardened by 1,000 war rooms and twice as many version 1.0 disasters. But the second he stepped into the ops floor and saw the dashboard glowing like a Vegas crime scene, he stopped cold. Every screen screamed red. Order failures. Sync timeouts. Latency spikes. A blinking tile labeled, "Integrity check," failed pulse like a cardiac arrest monitor. He didn't even put the drink down. "What the hell is going on?" he snapped, eyes scanning for someone who looked like they had a grip on anything. "Why's the real-time queue capped? Where's the fallback?" Silence. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights. A product manager stammered. "We pushed the Q3 hotfix. Orders were lagging. We figured." "You figured what?" the CTO barked. "That you'd go solo on a live deployment during peak sync windows?" Someone motioned toward the new dev lead, Corey Withano, rocking a Patagonia vest, and the kind of confidence that only comes from never being truly responsible for failure. "It was a minor patch," Corey said. "We thought it was safe. All the scripts were versioned." "Versioned?" the CTO hissed. "Where's the pre-validation gate? Where's the integrity check?" Corey blinked. "It's in the Jenkins pipeline." "No," came the low, slow growl from the CTO. "That gate is her. She runs that logic. Manual reconfirmation." That's when the tension in the room took a nosedive into freefall. Because now the CTO was looking around like a parent in a mall who just realized the kid's been gone too long. He snapped his fingers at a nearby engineer. "Get her in here. Now." A pause. Just a half second too long. Then someone said it. "She was let go this morning." The CTO froze. Not blinked. Froze. "You what?" he asked, more to the floor than to anyone in particular. VP Products said her role was redundant. They had a meeting. Cleared her systems. Security sweep started at 9:03. The CTO just stood there, staring into the mess like he could will time backwards. Then softly, almost to himself, he muttered, "Who approved this without her?" Someone coughed. Another whispered, he thought she was still around. The CTO turned toward the war table, that makeshift altar of MacBooks and chaos, and slammed his protein bottle down so hard it cracked. "Roll back everything," he growled. A tense pause. Corey paled. "We can't." "Why not?" "Because the old routines were built around her cron signatures. We don't know which variables she injected manually." "What about failover routing?" "Hybrid flagged. We tried triggering it. It started recursive loops. Jenkins choked. We killed the job." "You mean to tell me," the CTO said, voice now ice, That none of you can roll back to a stable state without tripping her overrides? A junior dev piped up. It's not our fault. She built everything like a maze. Half of it's undocumented. That's when the CTO turned. Slow. Intentional. It's not a maze, he said. It's a nest. And she was the hawk. The room was silent except for the soft whine of the air conditioning. Like even the building was wincing. The CTO looked like he aged 5 years in 5 seconds. He reached for his phone muttering, "Get me her number," before pausing and realizing he didn't even have it. Because the only reason he'd never needed to call her was because things never got this bad while she was around. And now she wasn't. And the system wasn't broken, it was just unsupervised. That's the thing no one tells you about fail-safes. They don't fail maliciously. They fail quietly. When the one person who knows how they work is gone. The logs were lying. That was the first thing they realized. Not in a malicious, somebody wiped the evidence kind of way. More like, the system had learned to lie nicely. Failures didn't crash outright. They just rerouted, disguised, buried under quiet green check marks and superficial OKs. Everything looked fine. But when they traced the stack traces deeper, the calls were bouncing like pinballs between ghost routines. At 10:12 a.m., they found the first breadcrumb. A scheduled override job labeled temp_patch_mar20. Except it wasn't March. And the script hadn't been touched in 18 months. It was still running. Who even owns this? Corey asked, flipping through Git commits like a monkey with a Rubik's Cube. Nobody knew. They checked the metadata. The job called a shell script. The shell script called a Python helper. That helper ran a SQL batch command on a separate database entirely. One no one had credentials for anymore. The intern Jake, babyfaced, 2 weeks out of boot camp, tentatively raised his hand. "I think this might be her patch layer?" "Which patch?" someone asked. He shrugged. "All of them." Turns out the patch system wasn't one system. It was a web. 3 interlaced routines, scheduled via 2 Jenkins jobs and 1 cron alias. Feeding from a dynamic list stored in a protected field in a private Google Sheet. The sheet's name? DNT_touch_this_for_real. .xlsx. Someone had, of course, touched it. At 10:47, they found the validation layer. Or rather, they found what they thought was the validation layer. A series of SQL views labeled checksum_A, checksum_B, and the mysterious sandwich_mode. Inside those views were references to temp tables that no longer existed. Manual flags cross-validated against values scraped from an old SOAP API. She'd manually rewritten after the vendor deprecated it 3 years ago. Why would anyone build something this way? Jake asked, blinking at 3 open terminals, each color-coded like a Christmas seizure. The CTO didn't answer right away. He was staring at one of the monitors. Something had just clicked. Not a system thing, a her thing. Finally he spoke, voice low. Because she was the only one who noticed what broke, when no one was watching. The air shifted. See, most devs build for success. They expect green lights. They trust inputs. But she built for failure. For the night a JSON payload comes in malformed from a partner API at 3:07 a.m. on a holiday weekend, and the entire processing queue hangs unless someone has the guts to parse it backwards and shove a ghost flag into the temp buffer. She didn't write code for the system. She wrote code for the chaos around the system. And now that she was gone, the chaos had RSVP'd. By 11:15, they'd uncovered half a dozen scheduled jobs that didn't exist in the repo. They lived in legacy Jenkins instances tied to a deprecated credentials file only she had access to. Worse, some of the core scripts she'd written weren't even on the server. They were on her local machine. Scripts she ran weekly, manually, with her own checklist, because she didn't trust auto-deploys to handle the weird cases. No one had her laptop. No one had her checklist. No one even knew what qualified as the weird cases. They tried to guess. They tried to rewrite. Every attempt made things worse. A webhook fired twice and flooded a customer with 1,200 duplicate shipment notifications. A warehouse froze outbound fulfillment for fear of releasing inventory flagged with inconsistent status codes. One mid-tier client called screaming, "Why is my inventory marked as banana?" Corey slumped into his chair muttering, "We need to bring her back." But it was too late for that. HR had already processed the offboarding. Legal had already terminated access. Her ID was deactivated. Laptop bose? NDA still in effect. The CTO just rubbed his jaw and stared at the op screen. It wasn't just red anymore. It was twitching, flashing alerts faster than the eye could track. But the worst part? There was no smoke, no alarms, no crashing servers. Just a slow, creeping drift. A system silently unraveling, not because someone sabotaged it, but because the ghost who kept it alive had finally stopped watching WY Noon. The executive suite smelled like fear and citrus Lysol. The VP of product, Chad, now visibly sweating through his designer collar, stood in front of a plasma screen pulsing with client escalation tickets. He jabbed at the air with his stylus like he could rewrite the timeline if he just clicked hard enough. "This is on engineering," he snapped, voice pitching higher with every syllable. "We had redundancies. We had documentation. If they followed protocol, this wouldn't be happening." Across the room, Corey shifted in his seat, fists clenched under the table. "We did follow protocol. Your protocol. You said to clean out legacy systems. Remove manual bottlenecks. You explicitly told us her patch layer was outdated." "That's not what I said. You said, and I quote," Corey cut in, voice trembling with rage, "if a process requires someone's intuition to work, it's a broken process." Chad turned beet red. That was in reference to code reviews, not. "Bullshit," said another dev, Rachel, the quiet one. 6 years in back-end systems. You gutted her logic tree because you didn't understand it and thought that made it unnecessary. She never documented anything. She did, Rachel shot back. You just never asked why she documented it that way. Silence. A chime broke the moment, a new Slack message from legal, appearing on the wall-mounted display. Red icon. All caps. Subject. Contract suspension Globeware. Effective immediately. Pending full SLA breach review. That was the first client to walk. Not threaten. Walk. Globeware had been with them for 3 fiscal years. They'd survived 3 system migrations, 2 pricing updates, and a CTO transition without flinching. But one afternoon of garbage data? One botched warehouse sync? Gone. The CTO, now seated like a carved statue in the corner, stared forward without blinking. The room looked at him like the final priest in a burning chapel. "Is it fixable?" one of the finance directors asked, voice thin. "Eventually," said Corey. "But we don't even know how many systems are drifting. Every new fix breaks another fallback. Every override touches something she wired in, and we don't even know how." More chimes. 3 new escalation emails. A compliance audit flagged. 1 mid-level client threatening public disclosure. "Someone must have sabotaged something," whispered a voice from the table. A heavy pause. Then it happened. Chad stepped back from the screen and said, with fake composure so transparent it practically wore clown shoes, "I mean, look, I'm not saying she did it on purpose, but no one else knew those systems like she did. If things start going wrong right after she leaves, you do the math." Gasps. Not dramatic ones, tight, subtle ones. Like people realizing they're in the blast radius of something nuclear. The CTO's chair creaked. Then he stood. He didn't yell. Didn't throw a chair. He just walked to the center of the room, adjusted his cuff, and said in a tone so flat it could have sharpened knives, "This isn't sabotage." Chad tried to interrupt. The CTO raised one hand. "This," he said again louder, "is negligence." He turned and pointed at the screen. That client dashboard? That validation layer? The fallback queues? All of them were working. Not flashy. Not modern. But they worked. Until someone decided working wasn't worth understanding. Until someone declared 5 years of living system logic redundant. Because it didn't come with a GitHub README in pastel fonts. He looked Chad dead in the eyes. You didn't just fire a systems lead. You amputated the company's memory. No one moved. In the back, someone closed a laptop. Slowly, like they were backing away from a crime scene. The word audit slipped from a board advisor's mouth like poison. Another whispered, "What about the Q4 investor call?" And from somewhere, maybe legal, maybe ops, came a final nail. We might be liable. Chad looked around, suddenly small, like a man who'd just opened a trapdoor and realized he was standing on it. The CTO turned to leave, but paused at the door. She didn't crash this system, he said without turning around. You did. When you assumed logic could be replaced by style. Then he walked out, leaving the room full of millionaires realizing they'd just flushed a company down the drain. Because one woman knew the difference between code and understanding. And now she was gone. The voicemail landed at 2:04 p.m. Straight to inbox. No ringtone. Just the little red dot blinking beside a number that used to mean chaos. Used to mean war rooms and coffee-fueled midnight saves. Used to mean trust. Now it meant desperation. Hey, the CTO's voice rasped through static, more gravel than tone, like he hadn't slept or maybe just woke up from a nightmare. I know you didn't do this. You don't have to prove it. I already know. A long breath. But you're the only one who can fix it. They don't even know where to look. He paused like he wanted to say more, like maybe pride was still trying to climb back in, but it was too late. The call ended with a sigh, not a plea. And he didn't call back. Didn't need to. I heard enough. But I didn't respond. Because I was already somewhere better. Downtown, corner of Ash and Fulton, inside a third-floor loft-turned coffee shop/startup hub. I sat across from the sharpest smiling man in recruiting I'd ever met. Leather boots. Horn-rimmed glasses. Jacket sharp enough to cut glass. And he already knew who I was before I gave my name. I saw the dashboard implode, he said, stirring oat milk into some overpriced science experiment of a drink. Right around 9:20, give or take. Knew it had to be you. Or rather, knew it had to be not you. He slid a small stack of papers across the table. Offer sheet. Signing bonus bolded in blue. 7 figures. No jokes. No games. We've got systems that need a spine, he said. You're not a developer. You're the organism. You see the bugs before they're born. I didn't laugh. I didn't argue. I just lifted my cup, black coffee, no sugar, same as always, and took a slow sip. The chaos behind me? Still burning. Still stuttering. I could almost hear the team back at my old company flailing through layers they thought were automated, tripping over handcrafted logic that couldn't be replicated with ChatGPT and a sprint board. They were running into walls they couldn't name, digging through backups they didn't know were corrupted by an old library I had replaced manually. Twice, after the vendor forgot to patch a known exploit. And somewhere, Chad was probably blaming Jenkins. Or Oracle. Or maybe just gravity. But here it was calm. No dashboard. No alerts. Just opportunity. And someone smart enough to know what they were buying. The recruiter leaned forward. You're not the kind of person who lets things fall apart. That's why I trust you. I smiled. First time all day it felt real. I don't let my systems fall apart, I said. This one stopped being mine the minute they called me redundant. Outside, the street was bathed in gold, end-of-day sun bouncing off windshields and glass towers. The kind of light you only get after a storm's passed. My old phone buzzed once more. Second call from the CTO. I didn't answer. I slid it face down. Let it ring into silence. Not because I was bitter. Because I was already building something else. And this time? No one was getting the keys but me. The memo leaked just before sunset. No fanfare. No all hands. No farewell cake in the break room. Just a cold, templated paragraph buried inside an internal Slack channel labeled #company news. Effective immediately, Chad Morrison has decided to pursue other opportunities outside the organization. We thank him for his service and wish him well in his future endeavors. No one believed a word of it. The VP of Product, Architect of Optimization, Killer of Tribal Knowledge, Spreadsheet Messiah, was gone. Just like that. One bad quarter. One destabilized platform. One too many, it's probably fine decisions stacked like Jenga blocks on a fault line. By the time the announcement hit email inboxes, the hallway whispers had already turned into a full-blown story arc. Someone swore they saw him leave with a banker's box and a stress ball still clutched in his hand. Another claimed he tried to blame the whole outage on an unauthorized Jenkins fork no one could find. But the CTO? He wasn't wasting time on spin. He was in front of the board. Alone. No slides. No pivot tables. Just a man who'd seen the edge, stared down the consequences, and come back with something better than an apology, a blueprint. They say he walked in with a single folder. Inside, a 3-page proposal, titled in all caps, Rebuilding the Bones. Page 1. A timeline of every failure since the redundancy firing. Page 2. A technical map of the undocumented logic, with red circles drawn around critical knowledge loss nodes. Page 3. An org chart with a new role proposed at the top right corner, just off the CTO's shoulder. Chief Stability Architect. Underneath it, one line of handwritten text. You don't fire the compass just because you bought a newer GPS. The board didn't argue. They didn't need to. Back at the old office, things got quiet. No more Slack bravado. No more automation-first sermons from on high. Just the sound of teams trying to remember how to fix what they never understood in the first place. Meanwhile, I was 3 days into onboarding at my new gig. No open floor plan. No kombucha bar. Just a modest little office with real chairs, working keyboards, and a team that respected why systems hold together, not just how they look when they do. My new manager? A woman named Elise. Mid-40s. Used to write firmware for MRI machines. Doesn't care about your portfolio. Just asks what you do when the logs go blank. She handed me a company laptop and said, "No rush. We don't want magic. We want margin." Imagine that. The recruiter's signing bonus had cleared. I hadn't touched it. Still driving the same battered Honda. Still packing my own lunches. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying a system's heartbeat in my head like a bomb waiting to explode. Now I was helping build something. From scratch. The right way. Slowly. Quietly. No ghost logic. No heroics. Just clean foundations. And I smiled. Not the tight, forced smile of someone trying to look unbothered while the world burned behind them. No. This was the kind of smile that happens when you realize your best work didn't die in the place that buried you. It just outlived them. And followed you someplace better. Back at my old company, they were still trying to piece together the maze I left behind. But here, I was already drawing blueprints for the next one. And this time, they'd be written in ink. They waited until Friday to try the full restore. A last-ditch Hail Mary. After days of half measures, patches that unraveled mid-deploy, and clients whispering the words transition plan, the old company finally did what desperate companies do. They reached for the past. The backup files were pristine, at least on paper. 3 days before my termination. Snapshot taken at 2:14 a.m. Cold storage. Verified. Untouched. The kind of backup you light a candle for. They spun it up in a staging environment first, sandboxed, scrubbed, isolated. Everything looked green, until the final sync job. Then the console threw it. Error. Dependency not found. Failsafe logic tied to employee ID. Removed. Please restore permissions or rebuild from scratch. Someone stared at it for a full 30 seconds before speaking. Employee ID removed? What the hell does that mean? They dug deeper. Turns out, part of the system's routing logic, specifically the handshake between the order validator and the backup queue, had been hard-coded to require a privileged handshake. Not because I was hiding anything, but because at the time, it was the safest way to guarantee that the failover wouldn't trigger unless I manually signed off. No one ever asked why the node was labeled Observer HB. HB. Heartbeat. You delete the heartbeat, the pulse stops. Now it was gone. Scrubbed by HR, purged by IT. Replaced by someone who thought security meant deleting credentials instead of understanding what they were tied to. The CTO saw it first. He didn't even get mad. Just stared at the screen, slumped forward in his chair, and rubbed his temples with both hands like he was trying to massage common sense back into existence. One of the sysadmins suggested spoofing my ID. Another said, "What if we just hard reset the entire module?" And someone, maybe Corey, maybe Rachel, finally said what no one else wanted to. It's not just the code. It's how it was wired. When it was wired. What it was reacting to. In other words, they could rebuild it, but they'd never replicate it. The system didn't need a new developer. It needed a historian. And that role had been terminated at 9:03 on a Tuesday. Across town, in an office built from real brick and not VC lies, I unwrapped a small cardboard box left on my desk. No note, no logo. Just a gift. Inside, a circuit board paperweight with a rusted capacitor mounted dead center. A joke. A story. An inside reference to nothing anyone else would understand. Yet, taped beneath it was a square of notepad paper. Handwritten blue ink. Thanks for not documenting everything just yet. We prefer learning it live. I smiled. No dashboards. No red alerts. No savior complex. Just a team that valued silence, stability, structure. The kind of people who see you rebuild a ghost logic system from memory and don't ask, why wasn't it in a wiki? They ask, what did you notice that we didn't? And they listen. Somewhere, in a half-lit ops floor that used to feel like home, they were still digging, still rewriting, still trying to decode a system I'd built like a living thing, with instincts, scars, and a pulse they never learned how to feel. They'd blame the tooling. They'd blame the exit. Maybe even blame the pace of modern tech. But they'd never find the line that saved them, because they never knew it existed. Sometimes the most critical line of code is the one nobody else knew existed.